Okay, let's really test out this algorithm now, shall we?
We ready to fuck or what?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, while my last 3 videos on this young YouTube channel have been about, I believe the scientific term is weeb shit, the whole point of this channel is for me to talk about the stuff I like, and that happens to be more than just anime and anime games and visual novels, though those things are by far the products I consume the most. I also, like any other normie out there, enjoy Western television series, and I plan on doing videos on some of those in the future, but, you know, we'll see. I've come to realize I need to be seriously inspired in order to actually finish writing a script, since I do this channel out of the need to have a concrete creative project and not as a job. And speaking of jobs, yeah, Succession. Ever had one of those cases where a series that's apparently so highly regarded and award-winning as Succession has somehow slipped under your radar? I just found out about it recently when me and my fiancé were digging around HBO Max in order to find a new series to watch together. And we pretty much gobbled it all up. I'm fresh out of season 3's finale cliffhanger, and holy fucking shit, there's no definite release date for season 4 yet, and that's killing me! Anyway, Succession is good. It's pretty great actually, and you should watch it. However, there's one key theme of the series that has really captivated me throughout its 3 seasons. And you know, this is a series with a lot of themes. It's about the many pitfalls of capitalism, how the super wealthy tend to be complete assholes, how corporatism influences and shapes the political climate, satire on toxic mega corporate environments, plus the characters are swearing all the time and mixing it up with business lingo that really reminds me of the meetings at a past company I worked for.
Waystar refused to play ball. I'm assuming they waved a poison pill in your face, and now you're launching a proxy battle.
Respectfully, we just take a beat. Let me put a solid pack together. We fire back when we have the ammo.
What?
Self-righteous fucking butterwood-mouthed, disingenuous Pulitzer pricks.
But the real thing that really gripped me throughout the show was its main cast, the Roy family, and how all of them are effectively trapped in a live-in hell designed by their very own patriarch, Logan Roy, and how that prevents them from actually growing as people. As usual, all-around spoilers for all 3 seasons of the show will follow. For those of you who don't know and/or may want to spoil yourself with this video anyway, hey, I'm not judging. I use YouTube to watch analysis and plot summaries of stuff I don't really plan on experiencing all the time. Succession is about Logan Roy, a media magnate who has allegedly built his company, Waystar Royco, from nothing, and his 3 children, well, 4 if you count Connor, but the fact that he is so out of the loop all the time is a recurring joke in the series.
Do you have any idea how it feels as the eldest son?
I am the eldest son.
Whoa.
Kendall, Siobhan, and Roman. Kendall, the eldest son,
I am the eldest son.
All right.
is promised to succeed his father as CEO now that he's getting old, but has the rug swept from under him as Logan says he won't be stepping down just yet. Siobhan is a political consultant that has never worked directly for the family company and has a husband named Tom who does work for the company. Roman is an incredibly weird, gross, and deeply troubled little brother who, despite being smart, acts in erratic, eccentric ways. Plus, he's portrayed by Kieran Culkin, brother to that kid on the Home Alone movies, you know the one. Once Logan has a stroke and goes into a coma, the 3 children, and Connor kinda,
I'm not saying I would make a better CEO. That's unsaid.
It's not unsaid when you say it.
begin to fight over who should be nominated as the next chairman, and things only escalate from there as the seasons go on. From there, we start to slowly but surely realize how all these characters are broken people, perhaps beyond repair. Now, Succession is one of those shows that doesn't really feature any flashbacks, so we're never directly shown what exactly happened to these people when they were younger. We are just casually told in certain sparse occurrences when the characters allude to one past event or the other. Even then, the actual veracity of such claims is sometimes deliberately questioned. Are the characters maybe remembering it wrong? Are they projecting onto others what they want to believe? And I think that's pretty neat, as it leads to that sort of slow burn character development that allows us, the viewers, to slowly piece together and interpret what makes all of these characters tick, which creates an odd sense of proximity with this cast that is comprised of absolutely terrible people. Like everybody, every single one of those guys and gals are major assholes in some way or another. But in this video, I want to focus on the Roy family, sorry, not you, Connor, and how each of them is tied to the abuse they suffered under the hands of their patriarch. Like everyone else, we are never shown who Kendall was before the start of the show. We're only told through those snippets of dialogue.
3 years ago, you were still in the nut house.
Rehab.
He's just back from rehab as he had prior problems with substance abuse. He's also in the middle of a divorce and has 2 children born out of that marriage, which was apparently a very rocky one due to his predilections. He was promised by Logan to succeed him in the coming days, but is immediately shot down by him during Logan's birthday dinner party. He's incredibly frustrated over it, and once his dad has a major health problem, begins to push for his nomination as the news of Logan's condition break and they need a name to avoid spooking the investors. Against the wishes of his siblings, he eventually becomes the CEO and discovers his dad took a massive loan that used the company's share value as collateral, meaning that once the stocks fell below a certain number, the bank would have the right to immediately demand payment with interest, which would very well bankrupt Waystar. Even though Logan eventually wakes up, he's still incredibly debilitated. Kendall has to do something in order to prevent the worst, so he manages to convince a frat buddy of his, Stewie, to buy off a large percentage of stock in order to prevent this from happening, though Stewie in return also gets a seat at the board of directors. Logan's reaction when Kendall informs him of this?
Fucking idiot.
Due to this and other instances of Logan clearly losing his mind, like pissing on office carpets, hitting his grandson over a petty little child play and whatnot, Kendall devises a plan to push for a vote of no confidence, which essentially means that the board of directors get to vote on whether they agree that Logan is unfit for his job and should thus be forced into retirement. Kendall teams up with Roman and several other characters in order to guarantee votes, but things don't go quite as planned. Despite his best efforts and some promises he managed to get, he's ultimately betrayed by some key members that could edge out a win, is humiliated by his father, and loses his job. He attempts to sue Logan while falling into deep depression, and in response, Logan spreads fake news about Kendall being back on drugs, which reaches his ex-wife.
Okay, that's not true.
Yeah.
That's not true.
It's just that's what you used to say when it was true.
Jesus, I'm not using Rob. I don't touch anything, and you know that. Jesus Christ.
This triggers a relapse in Kendall, who is earnestly trying to stay clean, finds himself back to square one. He then goes on to team up with one of Logan's biggest rivals, Sandy Furness, who was already in cahoots with Stewie by the way, and plots his big revenge, a hostile takeover of Waystar. Now, for those of you who don't know, a hostile takeover is essentially when you manage to convince the majority of the shareholders to forcibly change the company's management, in this case, taking Logan and the Roy family out of the picture in favor of Kendall, Sandy, and Stewie. This can be done in a variety of ways, and in Succession's case, it's about arguing with the shareholders that Logan has gone bananas and will therefore waste their money. It's actually a pretty good plan that, due to other circumstances, needs to be employed at Siobhan's wedding of all times and backs Logan into a corner. Kendall is actually set to win this battle. However, fate has other plans. Kendall is back on his old habits full force. We are shown that every time he needs to confront his father, he gets restless and stressed. Every time he gets restless and stressed, he needs some blow. He asks Stewie for some, but his friend catches on to the possibility of Kendall going way overboard and fucking up the announcement they need to make the next morning, so he just says he's got none. Kendall is stubborn, however, and manages to track down a caterer who was just that morning fired by Logan due to one of his hissy fits. The kid's got some ketamine, but Kendall wants the good stuff. The kid knows a guy who may have cocaine, but they need to drive to his location and he is just way too high to do it. Kendall offers to take the wheel, and during their little trip, Kendall fails to notice a deer in the middle of the road and the kid swerves the car into a lake. The car quickly sinks as Kendall manages to get out, but can't dive to save the kid. He attempts to leave the scene back into the wedding without being spotted and apparently succeeds, only to be called by Logan on the next morning. Logan's people have found his room keycard on the scene of the accident.
A rich kid kills a boy. You'd never be anything else.
Kendall breaks down as Logan promises to protect him in exchange for him to step away from the hostile takeover bid. For all of Season 2, Kendall is now a subservient lapdog of Logan's. He abandons Stewie and Sandy and keeps doing everything Logan asks of him, seeking deeper into apathy and drug abuse, distancing himself from his siblings as he deals with his guilt completely alone, with no emotional support from anyone, especially his family. That is until the very end of Season 2, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here.
Gobble the odd side dick.
I don't think it was cool what you did.
Shiv is the only female of the siblings and does not initially work for the company despite hovering around it at every chance she gets. She's a political consultant, openly sides with liberal politics despite the family's traditional Republican values, and is engaged to Tom Wamsgans, a country bumpkin who very early on lands a job at Waystar as the head of the cruises division. Yeah, apparently Waystar does pretty much everything, they even have theme parks. Now, for reasons that will become apparent, Siobhan and Tom's stories are deeply intertwined, so that's why the section is gonna feel like I'm talking about them both instead of just Shiv. Anywho, despite trying her best to appear otherwise, Shiv is clearly infatuated with the idea of one day working for Waystar and has a deep resentment over the fact her siblings do work there while she doesn't. She has her own career, which is pretty successful, but at the end of the day, like her brothers, she craves not only for the prestige of being the family company, but also Logan's approval. Tom, meanwhile, is a power-hungry man who wishes to quickly climb the corporate ladder, but on a brighter note, is also honestly in love with Shiv. He is, however, constantly taken for granted and used by Shiv in her little schemes to influence the happenings in her favor. He is always there to help and support her, but she's usually dismissive or outright hostile towards him, believing she has his undying support. Shiv is also terrible at being, faithful to a monogamic relationship. She has an ex-boyfriend called Nate, who is also a political strategist and cheats on Tom with him during their engagement. Nate, believing in her extreme competency on her job, pulls the strings to land her the opportunity to work for the Democrat Senator Gil Eves in his upcoming presidential campaign. Trying to spite her father for not giving her the attention she believes she deserves, she accepts to work for one of Logan's most vocal criticizers. Meanwhile, Tom finds out that the cruise division has been covering up an extreme scandal of institutionalized sexual and labor abuses. Stuff like girls being promoted for having oral sex with their boss, raving parties that end up with a dead prostitute in the water, exploitation of immigrant workers, the usual. At first, he wants to come clean to avoid further problems, but is deeply discouraged from doing so and decides to just destroy the evidence in order to make the problem go away. There's a lot of other stuff and characters involved in this, but for the sake of brevity, I'm just gonna gloss over those, okay? Later on her own wedding, she presses Tom over the details of the cruise scandal, so she can use it as political leverage to pressure her father into stopping the smearing campaign he's running against Gil, and convinces Gil to negotiate a truce with Logan, much to the dismay of Nate who, despite being a married sleazeball, is actually honestly invested in Gil's political ideals. Shiv merely tells him to fuck off when confronted and states she plays to win, when in truth she just wanted to make her dad proud while not relinquishing her independent position as a political consultant.
Who are you?
I'm Shiv fucking Roy.
And here's the cherry on top. On their wedding nuptials, she reveals to Tom she has been indeed having an affair and that she's not prepared for a monogamic relationship. Tom, still in love with her and finding it very difficult to actually stand up for himself, begrudgingly accepts. Later on in Season 2, when things escalate a bit and Logan is forced to strongly consider naming an actual successor, he promises Shiv will be the one. Finally feeling validated, she quickly throws away her pride in having her own career by quitting on Gil. Logan, however, keeps playing around with her expectations, refusing to reveal her nomination for the time being, and generally being ambiguous about where they stand. This drives her crazy, and it all comes to a head during an important dinner party. Oh yeah, to sum up the context on that real quick, Logan is an insane megalomaniac who, in face of the ever-dropping relevance of traditional cable news, decides to go after their direct competition, the Pierce family company, who's pretty much the same as ATN, but liberal, in order to essentially own a cable news monopoly. Since the Pierces are going through a bit of a rough patch financially, they eventually agree to host a dinner party in order to gouge a potential deal, and Shiv is so frustrated over not getting proper confirmation that she simply blurts out she's next in line during dinner.
You can...
Well,
Oh, for fuck's sake, Dad, just tell him it's gonna be me.
She of course loses her foothold as the next heir, and things further escalate once the whole cruise scandal finally comes to light, kills any chances of landing a deal with the Pierces, and lands Waystar in hot water as it's subject to a federal investigation. Now, it gets pretty dark for her. Shiv finds out Gil's got a decisive witness up his sleeve, a woman who has experienced firsthand all of the atrocities committed in cruises. She actually meets with her face to face, only to skillfully manipulate and intimidate her into not testifying in order to save the company.
They'll say terrible things. We'll call you a slut, and a whore, and a money grubber. Your life is gonna get ripped apart. The folks who want you to get up there tomorrow and get pulled apart, they want what's best for them. You need to think about what's best for you, huh?
The liberal in the family, who's always advocating for feminism and better treatment of women, is the one to do this.
So, break shit up. Like, just disrupt.
Roman is the youngest of the siblings, and describing him as eccentrical would be a massive understatement. He's off-putting in his weirdness, is constantly cracking sexual euphemisms and deeply disturbing jokes about himself and others.
I think I'm going to reveal to him that you sexually abused me as a child.
Excuse me?
Yeah, you just would not stop.
Keeps provoking everyone in ways that border on sociopathy and is just a creep in general. Early on in season 1, he cruelly challenges a poor kid into trying to hit a home run against his family by waving a $1 million check on his face. He masturbates on his new office once he gets a high rank at Waystar. He agrees with and participates on Kendall's scheme to call a vote of no confidence on Logan, but chickens out at the last second over how scared he is of his father.
You better be smelling your fucking armpit, Romulus.
Despite all that, he's also weirdly smart and charismatic when he needs to be.
I'm dumb, but I'm smart.
Throughout the series, he manages to convince people to do his bidding or secure extremely big, unlikely deals for Waystar by showing how insightful he can actually be when dealing with people. He is also capable of being kind and vulnerable on a number of occasions. When Kendall rebounds and goes on to do math with a bunch of weirdos, Roman shows up to get him out of there in what seems to be genuine concern over his brother. He attempts to time the space launch project he's in charge of with Shiv's wedding date in order to do a nice gesture, though that later proves to be an extremely stupid and irresponsible action on his part, and is shown to be a deeply insecure, awkward man in his relationships.
I just want to talk about it. You want to get married or not?
Do you think this is the way to get someone to stay?
It is shown in no uncertain terms that Roman has some sort of psychosexual disorder.
For one thing, we never fuck.
Oh, yeah, we do.
So far, at least, we are never told a reason for that. It is implied during some conversations and thematic leitmotifs that it may have something to do with the relationship he had with his mother, or that things that others perceived as harmless fun during his childhood were actually perceived by him as abuse.
Family.
He used to lock me in a cage.
What the fuck?
No, that's a true story. Oh wait, you're pretending that you don't remember the dog pound. Do you remember anything about a dog pound from when we were growing up?
Sure, I remember a game you used to play.
Well, okay, so he did. He used to lock me in a fucking cage.
Sure, the big cage, yeah, in your mother's place, the laundry room in Cheltenham.
Cheltenham, thank you. He's trying to gaslight me.
No, you liked it. You asked to be put in that cage.
What?
Or maybe he was outright abused at some point and nobody takes his remarks seriously.
I don't feel anything. It's a mental disorder. It's called borderline personality disorder. Why is everybody laughing?
Regardless, Roman is shown to be incapable of actually having proper sex. He appears to be deeply scared of it to actually do the deed, always turns down any chances he may get at it, and navigates through his relationship with Tabitha by generally avoiding to so much as touch on the subject. And when they do, well, this happens.
Help us.
What about my needs? But don't.
I thought we could just try. You can just keep your eyes closed, and I
should be turned on because dead women aren't wet.
You want it to seem like I'm dead.
I don't want to get into a semantic argument. Oh my god, no! It just can it be a little less like sex? Yay!
Now, there's this character on the show named Jerry. She's the general legal counsel of Waystar, and she's pretty much in the inner circle of the family. She's always around giving legal advice in order to avoid further trouble for everyone, and at some point she and Roman begin to develop a twisted relationship. You see, Roman can't get intimate with anyone else, but during a very weird phone call, both of them find out he does get off to being insulted by her. This escalates into other encounters and, through this clearly unhealthy method, they become closer to each other, to the point where Roman shows time and again that he cares about her well-being, and they do some soft team-ups here and there when the opportunity arises. Roman seems to feel like he, for the first time, is able to be more intimate with someone else, even if that someone is also dating someone else, and his way of showing it by constantly teasing, and some would say harassing her, is clearly fucked up. It gets to a point where he routinely sends her dick pics despite her warnings for him to stop, and then this happens.
Domestic operations.
Yeesh. And yeah, those are the Roy siblings. Completely broken, sheltered people that are always scrambling around their imperfections in search not only for power, but of approval of their ever-present father, Logan. And here's where I'll segue to this video's next segment. One common complaint I hear about Succession is how most characters, these three in particular, just don't really develop. They start as flawed, broken assholes and pretty much end every season as flawed, broken assholes. We are constantly shown how utterly self-destructive they are in all their major flaws, and how those flaws keep affecting their decisions until they are left miserable by the end of any given arc. And a lot of people defend the show by saying this is precisely the point, and I agree, but I think the issue that may bother viewers may lie a little deeper than that. I think it lies on how most of us tend to relate to fiction, what we expect from it. When dealing with stories, we always tend to divide and classify everything into arcs. It's the whole thing of the hero's journey that you no doubt have already heard about, but essentially, we expect characters to have some sort of arc, where they start one way and end in another. We usually expect said arc to be at least somewhat positive in depicting the evolution of a character, with them starting out as deeply flawed people and at some point learning from their mistakes, turning a new leaf, and becoming better people. That's just a tried and true formula we all look for in fiction, and Succession is one of those many other works that make me wonder, why is that? Well, I believe that fiction, at the end of the day, is about escapism. Yes, a lot of stories may feature very dark and depressing themes, have downer endings, and deal with problematic facets of reality, but at the end of the day, we use fiction to escape a chaotic world through the illusion of order. Think about it. Does real life have any order? I mean, I guess it has depending on your religion's beliefs, but despite that, does that order usually manifest itself to you easily? The world is a chaotic, unruly, and largely unpredictable place where terrible things may happen to good people, great things may happen to bad, and things just seem to happen without any particular rhyme or reason. We crave for agency over our reality, and if that's not possible, we at least look for structure, and fiction has structure in spades. In fiction, we have clearly defined character arcs. We have acts, natural plot progression, climaxes, poetic justice being exerted over characters that are portrayed in a negative light, etc. Even if a given story goes out of its way to blur the lines between good and evil, at the end of the day, any fictional writing has some sort of moral code deeply ingrained into it. In summary, we try to emulate a kind of order in fiction that is usually not really compatible with reality. The very concept of character development, for example. We always assume a fictional character will develop in a linear, or at least close to linear fashion, where they are constantly evolving into a better, or at least an interestingly different person. We get annoyed when a character goes through an arc that teaches them a life lesson, only for them to devolve into their former selves on the next one. We expect linear progression from these people, when that's not really how it works in reality.
What's the lesson here? I always want to make sure I know what the lesson is. I'm a completist.
How many people do you actually know in life that have steadily grown as a person without major setbacks, following a clearly defined life arc full of moral lessons that would require nigh cosmic levels of intervention? Probably not that many. You probably know a lot of people that don't really learn from their mistakes, instead wallowing in them and never really developing. You may know people that seem to improve after a perceived turning point in their lives, only to then go back to old, unhealthy habits. Because that's how real life goes. People aren't on their own hero's journey, their own linear arcs into becoming a better version of themselves, but we would really like to believe that's the case, and that's a big feature we look for in fiction. Not to say that Succession has no structure, of course. If there is anything the show has in spades, it's structure. It's full of little nuggets of foreshadowing for later events, stuff like literary quotes that turn out to be pretty relevant allegories for the plot, Shakespearean tragedy overtones, the cast's wardrobe reflects those sort of plot points, and possibly later ones, all that jazz. But part of its structure relies on this very specific plot device of not allowing its main characters to undergo their usual hero's journey. Well, quite obviously, it all links back to Logan Roy.
Go on! Fuck off! Story?
Yeah, from back in the day.
Oh, yeah? What, you want a bit about old fucking Rosebud?
Logan's actual history is still a mystery as of Season 3. He is, for all intents and purposes, the most important character of the ensemble. Always present within the show, the constant target of deep scrutiny and/or adoration by the characters, he is essentially a man that has made a myth of himself due to his sheer power as a ruthless media mogul. And yet, throughout 3 seasons, the show has given us very little on his past. We have next to no context on what exactly made him the way he is. We get quite a few nods here and there, but outside of that, it's up in the air. What we do know is that Logan was born in Scotland. His widowed mother then sent him and his siblings to live in Quebec, Canada, with his uncle Noah, who seems to have been a pretty abusive parent to them. Logan was apparently severely beaten by him and still has the scars to show for it, and he had a brother, Ewan, and a sister, Rose. Somehow, in the next 60 years or so, Logan was able to eventually build his mega empire. Ewan volunteered to serve the Canadian Army and fought in Vietnam, survived, and is also in the board of directors for Waystar, despite having a deep hatred for both what the company represents and his brother. We still don't know what exactly happened between them that made them so estranged. And as for Rose, well, we know nothing about her as well. We know she's apparently dead and that Logan blames himself for it.
All those years blaming yourself for Rose?
I'm not interested.
That really wasn't your fault.
Outside of that, nothing substantial. Logan is currently married to Marcia, a woman of Lebanese descent who is apparently fiercely loyal to him. She's his third wife, the previous one being the mother of the 3 main kids. Whatever may have happened in his past, it has shaped Logan into a ruthless, borderline sociopathic liar and manipulator that is constantly using and abusing people for his own means. Lies come naturally to him in a way that is scary.
You know who I am.
I can't see the bottom of the pool. And I don't know if you care about anything. And that scares me.
He has next to no morals about any one thing he does and, most of all, jerks his children around the entire show to get what he wants. It's clear that he deeply understands the state of mind his children find themselves into. They all desire his favor, his approval, and his acceptance, and he manages to manipulate them into a corner to always win. He keenly understands what each of them want and how they'll act from there, and emotionally abuses them into submission, pits them against one another to prevent any sort of coordination on their part, and is generally a huge dick. He has essentially designed a family dynamic that makes his children his personal emotional hostages, fully dependent on him in some way, shape, or form, and he simply will not allow them to grow. Despite all the wildly inappropriate remarks, we see how Roman is actually a good businessman, or at the very least a good people person. He has a knack for alluring people, using his quirkiness as a sort of charisma that's capable of breaking through other people's defenses in order to make them interested in what he has to say. During Season 1, when Logan insists on going after local TV stations to expand his empire, Roman actually manages to work out a pretty good deal in which both parties are happy. This is what Logan has to say to him, however.
He's smiling.
It's no good if he's smiling.
Well, objectively, I mean, if we get what we want and he gets what he wants...
You screw them out. You chisel them out. You fucking hurt them. And then you watch them squeal.
To Logan, it's not enough to get what he wants. He needs to destroy his adversary, be the only one left standing as a symbol of absolute power. Another part of his abuse comes in the form of establishing absolutely unrealistic expectations for his children. He doesn't want them to grow. Not really. He resents them for being born rich over the fortune he has made for himself on their humble beginnings.
And you're so fucking jealous, aren't you? You're so fucking jealous of what you've given your own kids. You can't handle it. You can't work it out.
They're simply not worth it in his eyes, no matter what they do, and he always makes sure to let them know just how much they fall short of his expectations. He plays around with Shiv by dangling her dream, the position of CEO, in front of her constantly. When he finally promises it to her, he then willfully acts in ambiguous ways every time she tries to breach the subject in order to be sure. We also see how Shiv is clearly not prepared for it anyway. She's insecure, constantly trying to act tough and unbothered by the prospect of power, but always crumbling over the possibility that his dad is playing her. During the cruises crisis, Logan goes so far as to give Siobhan a high position within the company over her arguments for feminism and protection of female workers, a position that she later finds out is exclusively political. No one inside the company takes her seriously. She's just a figurehead in an attempt to revise Waystar's image. But perhaps no other sibling exemplifies this emotional prison as much as Kendall. As we see in Season 1, what essentially pushes Kendall back into drug abuse is Logan himself. Once Logan learns of Kendall's plan for a hostile takeover, he sets up a sibling reunion especially so that they can all bully him into submission.
I blame myself. I spoiled you.
When Kendall gets into the accident, Logan immediately uses the opportunity to seize control of his unruly son, acting like a caring father that wants to protect him in a rare and obviously false show of paternal love.
You're my boy. You're my number one boy.
He turns his son into a loyal servant, using the fact that he cleaned up his mess, pitting him against his siblings whenever needed, using him for extremely uncomfortable dirty jobs, and constantly belittling him over his betrayal, his lack of spine, his predilection to addiction. At one point, Logan needs to talk to the parents of the kid Kendall killed and makes a point to bring him along just to torture him. Once the crisis over cruises escalate to a point where they need someone to take the fall, he chooses Kendall as the sacrifice. And just when you think he will willingly go to prison, Kendall does another power move.
The truth is that my father is a malignant presence, a bully and a liar, and he was fully personally aware of these events for many years and made efforts to hide and cover up. How much those of us who executed his wishes bear responsibility is for another day, but I think this is the day his reign ends.
Season 3 revolves around how Kendall again tries to overtake Logan, and it doesn't go well. He does have quite a lot of chances, but begins to gradually squander all of them as his childlike ego gets in the way and erodes whatever goodwill he may have with all the people that could help him. After a particularly low point on his birthday party, Kendall goes to a deeply dark place. He attempts to talk to his father about wanting out of the company since he can't take it anymore, and this is how Logan responds.
I need to think about it.
Well, you offered at my birthday. So
that was for fun.
Dad, we can't do this bullshit forever.
Maybe I want you close. You can do the mail. Keep you rattling around.
That moment, for me, is particularly brutal. Logan does not even allow his defeated son the possibility of escape from his clutches. For all of Kendall's transgressions, Logan seems to deep down amuse himself with their tension. Or maybe, like with that Roman deal earlier, Logan doesn't think this clean of a victory is enough. Maybe he thinks Kendall doesn't have the right to walk away with any money, because he doesn't deserve to win at all. Or maybe he just enjoys having a puppy he can keep on kicking.
No, you could have had dogs.
No, not with your father. He never saw anything he loved that he didn't want to kick it just to see if it would still come back.
On the next day, Kendall drinks too much and nearly drowns himself in a pool. And this brings us to the Season 3 finale. In summary, there's this big shot founder and CEO of a streaming company called Gojo. Basically, this universe is Netflix. Logan decides it would be a good idea to buy Gojo since Waystar's own streaming platform is crap. He puts Roman in charge to get in touch with him and secure a deal, which is eventually successful. But then, the dude comes up with a proposal of his own, for Logan to retire and sell Waystar to him instead. Now, while Logan is indeed shown throughout the series to be incredibly proud of his company and generally unwilling to consider selling it, he is also stated to understand the fluid nature of the world.
Nothing is a line. Everything, everywhere, is always moving. Forever.
This time, to the surprise of all his children, he decides to sell. All of this is happening during the second wedding of their mom, by the way. Once Siobhan and Roman realize this, they begin to think of a way to stop the acquisition. Kendall, at first, is completely uninterested and resigned to whatever crap fate has in store for him, until his siblings push him around so much that he finally breaks. He reveals to them how he accidentally killed the caterer on Shiv's wedding. Due to sibling bonds, or just in the interest of getting him to actually get his shit together, they comfort him.
Don't, man, I'm a killer.
At worst, you're an irresponsibler. Okay, you're bigging yourself up.
Maybe not in the most tasteful way, but still. Kendall then realizes something. They can stop Logan. As per the conditions in the divorce agreement between Logan and their mother, he can't decide to sell the company on his own. He needs his children's support on the matter, and if they band together to vote against him, they can effectively stop the sale. Finally, after 3 seasons of constant scheming, backstabbing, and sabotage, the siblings realize they can work as a team. They will finally be able to stick it to him and, by extension, grow past his gigantic shadow. Shiv quickly calls her husband to let him know of their plan. They confront Logan together. He tries his old tactic of choosing the most vulnerable child and trying to goad them into not cooperating. It doesn't work. He is absolutely furious and reveals his final move. Caroline, their own mother, has just renegotiated their divorce agreement to no longer include the children. They are now absolutely powerless, with no rights to do anything regarding Waystar. Roman begs Jerry for help, using their pre-established relationship as an excuse. She brushes him off. Shiv is left speechless when she realizes who told Logan of their plan. These characters can't go through their personal hero's journey. Every time they may take a step forward into breaking free from Logan's control and into their own person, he's there, watching, waiting to reel them back in again into his never-ending cycle of abuse. We are never outright told what exactly these people had to endure in their childhoods, but it's always implied that they were always imprisoned to his will. Offhand commentaries about how scared of him they are. The way each of them gets skittish over the mere thought of confronting him about anything, and how, through his machinations, each and every one of them devolves into being the worst version of themselves, replicating bad choices over and over, until they lose completely. Now, that's not to say the Roy children are just poor victims of their all-encompassing father. Even if their troubled upbringing and ongoing abuse by the hands of Logan does put their behavior into perspective, it's not like they shouldn't be held accountable for their actions. After a certain point, it is of course their fault that they are such terrible people. It's not like they want for anything. They're all rich beyond belief and could very easily just walk away from it all on multiple occasions. Kendall could just go on living off the money from his shares at Waystar and maybe do his own thing if he didn't constantly attempt to seize the company for himself. Shiv could just keep up with her pre-existing and very successful career as a political consultant and do just fine while still being rich. Roman could do pretty much nothing and still be able to afford an army of therapists to take care of his mental health. A big part of the show is parroting how the super rich are often entitled, kinda stupid assholes, and how they are out of touch with reality.
Ortolan.
What's ortolan?
It is a deep-fried songbird.
Oh, I have it.
For the head, the exact purpose is debated. Some say it's to mask the shame, others to heighten the pleasure.
Oh my God.
I mean, that's not a real thing, right? That can't be a real thing. I mean, let's see here, okay, oh my. Jesus. Anyway, there are still total pieces of shit that do terrible things, but I find it infinitely interesting how their awful personalities are all connected to the ball and chain that is Logan Roy. Who knows what Season 4 holds in store for us, but as of right now, I feel like these characters just can't develop. They can't grow into better versions of themselves because they don't have the tools to do so and are wholly reliant on Logan as a factor to allow them to become better people. And he never will. Now, I know this may sound like an incredibly silly take, and that's because it is, but throughout watching Succession, I just can't shake this weird feeling that these characters are all in hell. A constant loop where they keep suffering over their own inadequacies, their shame, and their reoccurring realization that they just can't reach their goals. Constant reminders that they aren't good enough, and that nothing that they have, as extravagant and luxurious as it may be, will never, ever be enough. They will strive to find it, to claim it for themselves, but they'll never get it. They'll never reach what they covet. And I think that is true for Logan as well. As much as we understand that he's a complete monster, there are hints that there's still a human being beneath that monstrous outer shell. Someone capable of feeling deep guilt over the death of his sister. Someone who has himself been abused until he swore to himself never to be the victim again. Someone who's now only capable of replicating the abuse he endured into his acquaintances, his family, the entire world, until everything around him is nothing more than a grayed out, ugly, cynical reality where only those who abuse are able to thrive. And he's the biggest abuser. He sits there at the top, gazing about all the lands he has ravaged or helped to ravage, and sees nothing but shit. Whew, okay, anyway, that's all for today, guys. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing. Maybe check out some of my previous videos and all that YouTube jazz. So yeah, that's it. Thanks and bye.